Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. If I could ask you to take your seats so we could start the event this afternoon. Thank you very much to everybody for coming out this afternoon. We really do appreciate you being here, and we value your time at this busy trade show. I'd like to first welcome you on behalf of all of my colleagues on the RJC management team, and also all of RJC Board of Directors and all of the members. We'd also like to thank very much, before we begin, Baselworld for helping us to host this important event and this important discussion this afternoon. If I can start quickly by showing a new video, which we've just created. We premiered it at Hong Kong just a few weeks ago. So this is the European premiere of RJC's new video.
The Responsible Jewellery Council is an international standards and certification organisation that's helping to build a responsible worldwide mining to retail jewellery and watch supply chain. Founded in 2005 by the industry for the industry to promote trust and accountability across the global supply chain. Today, it has over 1,000 members throughout 70 countries, covering more than 8,700 facilities and over 445,000 employees. Its mission is to be the recognized standards and certification organization for supply chain integrity and sustainability in the global fine jewelry and watch industry. Achieving RJC certification means meeting the highest ethical, social, and environmental standards. The RJC develops world-class standards that cover the whole supply chain, accredits independent audit firms to carry out RJC certification audits, harmonizes with numerous industry initiatives and standards to reduce audit burden, and provides member certification against its Code of Practices standard, which includes human rights, labor rights, environmental impact, mining practices, product disclosure, and many more vital areas in the jewellery supply chain. Additionally, voluntary certification against its chain of custody standard supports claims for responsibly sourced precious metals. Put simply, RJC certification helps members provide credible assurance to suppliers and customers by upholding their commitment to responsible business practices. This protects the reputation of its members and the industry, as well as connecting responsible businesses in a community of confidence, and strengthening CSR and supply chain risk management across the globe. The Responsible Jewellery Council. Assurance, growth, confidence.
Welcome to our event this afternoon again. If I can just go through a couple of points of housekeeping. We are not expecting any fire drills this afternoon, so if there is an alarm, please, if you could follow event staff. The exits are clearly marked here on your right of the room. Also, I'd like to remind you all, if you didn't know, that we are live streaming today to the internet through our social media channels. So if there's any active discussion, please bear that in mind, that this is going out live at this time. Just very quickly, if I can, it's my pleasure to stand up and welcome you all, and for my first time here in Basel to represent RJC, the Responsible Jewellery Council. For those of you who are new to the room, I know there's many members and many supporters for many years of the RJC's work, but very briefly, as you can see, our vision is for a responsible supply chain for the watch and global fine jewellery industry. And it's important to recognize that RJC was established by many of the large players in the industry back in 2005, really to provide that assurance for the consumer and protect consumer confidence. It's important to recognize that now, in 2018, I'd say approximately 60% of our members are what we define as small businesses. So despite our fathers and mothers being large companies, we're very much welcome and are open to all sizes of businesses within the supply chain. It's always very nice for us to have the opportunity to update those of you that spend your time with us on some numbers. It's been a very healthy few years for RJC. The membership numbers have been growing by around about 25% every year for the past few years, showing that there is increasing interest in the work that we're doing and the need for standards and certification within the jewelry and watch industry. As you can see, during the course of the past year, since we were here in Basel last year, we've broken through the 1,000 member mark, just under 1,100. And if I can just highlight one other number on this slide, the fact that we have over 450,000 employees around the world within scope of the code of practice that my colleagues in our standards team has developed. Now, why is that number important? As I've been out there for the past few months talking to the industry and to our members, people have been often asking, about the values and the benefits of membership of RJC. And just one of them that I've been identifying is employee acquisition and retention. The fact that nowadays many younger people who are choosing which industry they want to enter into want to feel confident about the companies and the industries that they're working in. So 450,000 means 450,000 employees around the world whose worker rights are protected through the adherence to local laws by our members. And you can extrapolate those numbers out to all of their families and dependents. So I think this is a very positive impact that RJC is having globally. It's important to recognize our membership is all the way from mining through to retail. This is just a quick snapshot of some of the companies that have joined us on this journey of continual improvement in their business processes. So we can see, of course, some very large mining organizations such as De Beers and Alrosa, and a very wide and diversified product range through some of the retail members, such as Tiffany, all the way through to other brands such as Pandora. So it's fantastic to have such a diversity of fora, i.e. different categories of membership, but also different sizes and qualities of product that's being offered through to the consumer. Just a very brief, if I can take a minute of your time, update of where we are with our standards review, a very important part of our work. As I often tell people as I've been meeting with members, we have a product that we offer to our members. It's our code of practice. So the review for this year's review of the code of practice is well underway now. We're into phase 2 for those of you that are involved in that. It's a very important year for us at RJC because we've been tackling the challenge of bringing colored stones and silver within scope of membership. So we're very, very pleased to say we're having very productive and active discussions with members of the colored stone community, and we're pleased to see a few of those members in the room with us here today. These public and member consultations will be continuing throughout the year, starting with open consultations starting in Antwerp and in Geneva in the month of April. And if you wanted to know more about that, any of my colleagues or myself would be happy to help you with that. We are scheduled to be able to release the new Code of Practices standard by the end of Q4. Another important point of why our work is so important this year is we are aligning ourselves 100% with OECD due diligence guidelines. That is an absolute intention that my colleagues are working very hard on. And for those of you who know this, that's a very important step for RJC and also for the industry. Our chain of custody standard, as you know, this is a voluntary standard for members, and it covers platinum and gold materials in the supply chain. And we launched and completed the review of that standard at the end of last year, and certification for companies are available starting next month. Again, if any of you have any interest in that, and I've heard a number of companies approaching me here at Basel interested in this, we would welcome you to ask us any questions about that. So without further ado, I'm sure you feel I've talked too long already, so I'm going to hand over to the stars of the show this afternoon, and I'd like to hand you over to my colleague, Mr. Andrew Bone. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you very much indeed for that introduction, Ed. And again, I'd just like to echo what he said, a very, very warm welcome to all of you. As we are always aware, this is a very busy show, and it's about sales. And I know you're all working hard to get your products out there, and coming here, we appreciate it very much indeed, especially to our members. And it's so good to see some really old dear friends of mine and good new friends as well that I'm looking to make as we go along as well. So thank you again, welcome to you all. What we're here to discuss here this afternoon, communicating conscious, or excuse me, really we're talking about storytelling. Now, everyone in this room is associated in one way or another, indirectly or directly, with a beautiful product, jewelry. That jewelry has been handcrafted, hand-designed. It is, each and every piece that we sell is in itself, quite rightly, a work of art. And in order to sell that to the consumer, we need to sell a story behind it. And that's what goes on every day in jewelry shops and boutiques around the world. But accompanying that, and as we have all of us learned over the last couple of decades, is the story also has to go further than that. The story has to be built around these beautiful products to assure the customer that the emotional investment that they're putting into that beautiful piece of jewelry also has to match the way that each of those component parts, the gold, the diamonds, the rubies, whatever has gone into them, is also up there to the highest human emotional standards that they themselves would expect and are investing in that. So that's what we're here today to talk about, is that story that goes along with the product, and how important that is. Because I spent many years working for De Beers, and as you're all aware, you've all heard of conflict diamonds. This is something we had to talk about, the story of the diamonds that came from communities where those communities were benefiting from that. And it was the vast majority of diamonds were benefiting the communities in which we were operating. And it was incumbent upon us to tell that story, to show the consumer, to show our customers that the product that we were selling them was up to the very highest, as I say, of human values. But you can have as many wonderful CSR policies and standards in place as you like, but if you're not able to communicate that, to make people understand what it means, how valuable it is, what it does, then that investment loses a great deal of its value. So I'm really delighted today that we have two experts from the field who are going to be able to help us. So this is going to be sort of like a beneficial and educational, a two-way discussion, if you like, because we're going to talk about their experiences, Diana from Chopard, and also Rachel talking about her view, with her overview of the industry and how she observes that as well. And at the end of that Q&A session, we very much look forward to and would value and welcome your input as well. As Ed said, I'd like to welcome all our colleagues and friends online. If you're watching, very warm welcome to you as well. And I'd also like to, at this point, say thank you. We're very pleased. Ed's only been with us a while. We're delighted to have him and his huge expertise that he brings to the role of Director of Business Development. But I'm also delighted that we have other members of what I call the A-team of the Responsible Jewellery Council, Maria, up at the back there, and Jin is also on that side, and they'll be helping also with the Q&A at the end of it. And also Jed, who has also put all of this together, but it's been a great sort of team effort, and it's always a great deal of pleasure for me to go out on the road with my team and to be able to interact and engage with the industry and also our members. So what I'll do now is I'll ask if Rachel and Diana, please would you join us on the stage? Okay, well, thank you again. Diana is the head of corporate social responsibility at Chopard, and she's responsible for leading and implementing Chopard's group strategy in terms of sustainable supply chain, environmental management, work-life balance, as well as philanthropic commitments. And Rachael Taylor is a freelance jewellery journalist and a regular contributor to A wealth of titles across the globe, including the Financial Times, Retail Jeweller, Rappaport, and Luxury London. She is also IGL's trend editor and curating the jewelry trends seen on the exhibition's catwalk, and is the founding ambassador of the Women's Jewelry Network, which we very much applaud, and well done for your work in that, Rachel. This year, Rachel will be launching a new project, The Jewelry Cut, which is a digital platform dedicated to the most sparkling people, innovative creations, and secret success stories in the jewelry business. So thank you very much indeed, both of you, for joining us. And what I'd like to do is maybe start with you, Rachel, if I may. Mm-hmm. As a trade journalist, a freelance trade journalist, as we said, with this bird's eye view of the industry, I wonder if you could give us some insight into how you see companies across the business communicating these stories that we were talking about, and how effective are they?
Yeah, I think there's a real sort of division right now in the industry with how people approach ethics in the business. I think there are the companies who make it the absolute core and foundation of their business, and that's the entire message. You go to them because they're an ethical jeweler. Everything they talk about is to do with ethics and beautiful products that are made without harming the environment or harming people, and that's great. But then I think there's actually sort of another side of it, and this tends to be larger companies as well, who are doing all the right things, but are actually doing it quite quietly in the background. And that seems to be sort of a shift again. I think maybe because for a long time, when ethical jewelry maybe wasn't quite as established as it is now, there was a real sort of association with ethical jewelry as being quite craftsy, or maybe quite, very handmade. And actually there's, very big companies like Chopard who are sort of doing all these right things, but they don't necessarily want to shout about it to the consumers, because they don't want their first thought to be that, oh, this is an ethical piece of jewelry, so actually, is it not as good almost as, another type of like luxury jewelry?
Yeah, I think you're quite right there, because again, sort of going back to my experience in diamonds, in the first part of sort of conflict diamonds, we had very enthusiastic retailers who would come up and say, oh yeah, we'll put stickers in the window saying we don't sell conflict diamonds. And we said, yeah, well, it's see where you're coming from, but I think the analogy that sort of came up to counter that was, it's a bit like going to a kindergarten and sort of the signs say we don't employ pedophiles. You know where they're coming from. They're trying to assure the customer, but at the same time it puts more questions than answers into them. And that's what you've observed as well. Let me go on to sort of those that you have observed, those strategies of communication, and how that has sort of evolved and grown, and how you've seen some companies, some sectors differentiate themselves in the message that they're getting across.
I think it's interesting now, because even though I said that a lot of companies maybe want to do it more quietly, so they're not necessarily associated with the kind of smaller designer makers of the industry, I think it's becoming cooler to kind of talk about it now. I think especially with, now we have sort of younger, and I'm going to say millennials because everybody loves to talk about millennials, but now that we have this sort of younger consumer group coming through, I think actually there's an evolution in it being okay to talk about it. But I think it's really difficult to kind of set the tone. I think you guys have done a great job, especially with your announcement this week, which is great. But it's just kind of, I think there is going to be an evolution towards talking about it more, and I think maybe less of a fear culture around it. Because I know definitely from the retail side of you, I've spoken to retailers about ethical jewelry, and the main problem, this is particularly to sort of certifications like Fair Trade or Fair Mind, and one of the biggest objections they have to having Fair Trade or Fair Mind gold in their shop is that it's going to taint the rest of the jewelry that's there. And I can completely understand that, because when you're kind of thinking about that and you're like, oh, well, this is the good gold, but we won't kind of talk about everything else, but it's fine. But again, I think that's changing, because it's about making a decision to support something that has a positive contribution, in the same way that you go to a supermarket and you might choose to buy fair trade coffee, or you might actually choose to buy, I don't know, sort of local artisan coffee, which maybe doesn't have fair trade certification, but they can probably know where their coffee comes from as well. But it's about having that choice, and I think hopefully the change in marketing strategies and the way we're going to talk about it is going to improve, and it's not going to be quite such a touchy subject maybe as it once was.
Yeah, again, building up sort of the dialogue and sort of giving people permission to talk about this kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Diana, let me just come on to you, and I wonder if you could just give us an overview of Chopard's approach to CSR and sustainability.
Well, the Chopard is a family business. It's a brand which is 160 years old, almost. And we have always been active in philanthropy and that sort of commitments, you know. But CSR as such, as a function, it has been formed recently. It's a new entity, new job, new activity for Chopard. So historically, all the brands, indeed, they were doing philanthropy, doing good, contributing to noble causes, in doing this quite discreetly, indeed. So slowly, we also learned that actually, speaking about these activities, there is no shame in it. On the contrary, we saw that the benefits for especially at the beginning for our employees, because the motivation it gives, the retention rate it gives, you know, because actually people, millennials or other generations, are eager of identifying themselves with the brand, with the company they work for, that they share the values, and that they are together, you know, in the same effort that the company is, and they have more pleasure in coming to the company every day and working for this company. So we say when we started working on those CSR subjects, we started first talking to our employees and trying to cultivate this family spirit, you know, the proximity with our staff. And so the motto there was, if we have happy diamonds, we shouldn't have happy people, you know. So it has been like this. So about the communication channels, yeah, we always cultivated this proximity and being that employees feel consulted, you know, involved, because finally they are those who are bringing those initiatives onto the table, you know, and from the moment they feel that they are listened, consulted, and that their ideas are implemented, they are so eager to follow up those ideas in the field. So, and this is how it all started. We have seen all that enthusiasm among our employees for these, be it environmental management, be it supply chain initiatives we have been introducing. We saw this enthusiastic reaction and said, well, there's no reason why we shouldn't be enlarging our communication and going public, actually. So this is how it all started. And yes, indeed, we have made the announcement last Thursday? Yeah, no, Wednesday. So yeah, and now it's all current, and indeed there is also the fear that what about if we do start somewhere, what about the rest? We also gone through that when we started with the Fairmind goal, indeed. So this is the good goal, and what about the rest? And we had all that sort of questions, indeed.
Good, I'm glad you brought up the employees as well, because that is often an overlooked sector. You know, a lot of companies, I don't know whether you'd agree with this, Rachel, in your observations, a lot of companies tend to talk over the heads of their employees to the outside world, thinking that's the most important part.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, again, from my own experience in De Beers, when we were having to sort of deal with conflict diamonds, one really important part of that were the employees. And because I was on the forefront of De Beers' involvement in it, I was getting at lunchtime in corridors, going into work, out of work, questions all the time from colleagues, and we realized it was very important. In fact, I remember saying to Global Witness at the time that when they were doing their consumer awareness campaigns, probably they were ignoring the most fertile and important audience of all. If you want to sort of get your message across, it's the employees, whether it's the company or whether it's these outside stakeholders, because they're key to this. It's what we called at De Beers the pub test. Can you be well informed enough about your social, your corporate social responsibility strategy and what you're doing about important issues like, say, conflict diamonds, to be able to go into a restaurant, into a family event, into the pub, and explain to your friends why you're still working for this company and why you're proud of what they're doing for it. So what would be your view on that, Rachel? Is it something that companies need to concentrate on a little more?
Yeah, I would think definitely, because I think there's, especially, I think definitely larger companies, but also jewelry companies in general, I think there's a natural distrust from people. I think almost the default is that, you know, maybe this has been got in sort of a nefarious way. Whether that's true or not, I just think that's sort of general people's perception of jewelry. So actually having your employees completely engrossed in the message, and as you say, being able to go to the pub and talk to their friends about it, it suddenly sort of radiates from the bottom out that, you know, this is a company that's interested in doing good things. All the staff know about it. If it just tends to come from the top, it sounds like spin. So it just sounds like the marketing director and the chief exec have got together and been like, oh crap, you know, we need to put out a positive message. So, you know, they call a few journalists like me and they kind of spread that around. And if you actually went and asked somebody who really works for the company, they'd have no idea what you're talking about and no idea what, you know, what they're trying to do and what it's supposed to be. And it doesn't feel as authentic. I think if you really embed it into the company culture, then it feels like that's core to the business and that's what you want to do. I think if it's just top heavy, then suddenly it feels a little bit like spin.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thanks.
Yeah.
And Diana, just how have you seen membership and certification of the with the Responsible Jewellery Council? How has that sort of been part of your strategy, being able to communicate exactly what you do, and how has that helped?
Well, when we joined the RJC at the very beginning, I remember we have downloaded all the standards, the assessment questions, plenty of documentation. And in one of the documents, there was a good illustration with the domino game, which was really to illustrate the effort of RJC with this domino effect. So I remember quite well that, that picture, and this is exactly what we feel today that the RJC did for our CSR strategy, actually, because, well, we speak about our suppliers, we speak about our employees, and this domino effect when this standard is applied to us, but also to all our network. I mean, we feel that this from mine to the shop window, this effort is there now. There's 1,000 certified members. The confidence that we are certified, our suppliers are certified, is a network of confidence is being built, you know. And that is externally and internally. What was interesting, what in the watch industry, we say that your watch should be going through an overhaul every 2-3 years. Working or not working, but still it's a general checkup of your watch. And this is what RJC audit is for us, actually. Every 3 years, we go through an overhaul. We know all the standard, we know how robust it is. It goes into all the details of the company functioning, be it financials, be it procurement, be it employee health and safety at work, you know. So, and the recertification audit, it's the moment when we go through all these practices, all these procedures, maybe through the recommendations the auditors made on the previous visit, and it is truly the overall, you know. So it is the moment to see, oh, maybe we forgot something, maybe we should improve something, maybe something has changed in the standard, and now we have to introduce something new. So it's really the overall for us, you know. So,
Good, I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because we're going through an overall ourselves at the moment. And that's also what it's about. I mean, that's a really good point, I think. Refreshing, always refreshing what it is you're looking at, what the risks are, what the challenges are, and also, of course, always what the opportunities are. So I really like that, because that sort of creates that sort of empathy, if you like, between us and our members, that we're all going through this exactly the same way, exactly at the same time. And it's not just the RJC saying to the world, this is what the new standard is, because as Ed spoke earlier on about, this is about engagement with the outside world. It's about engagement with Diana and her colleagues. It's about engagement with you to make sure that we are getting those very newest ideas, that we're keeping ahead of the game, that we're going through this overhaul, as you put it, Diana, together. So I just wonder, again, if I could put that to you, Rachel. How do you see, again, from this bird's eye view, the value of that relationship, that dynamic between the industry and organizations like the RJC, and how it is perceived in the outside world?
Yeah, I think it's important to have a link with organizations. I think it's important for everyone to work together, because that's when more things will get done. But I would also kind of caution towards just I'm not saying the RJC, but just signing up to kind of any sort of organization, because I think if everybody was signed up, it almost loses its trust a little bit. Yeah, I think it should almost be quite difficult to achieve these sort of associations, because while you want to, this is my opinion, but while you want to sort of, you do want to hold people's hands and encourage them to sort of do more and do better, there comes a point where actually they need to, if a company's completely gone all out and absolutely has a transparent supply chain, and they can sort of get a similar stamp of approval as somebody who's, just interested in sort of more of a philanthropy side. I think it's a difficult message, I think, definitely for the RJC to communicate with consumers, because for them, you've got different levels of how you work with companies, but for consumers, they just see RJC, and I think that's it. I think it's a tough job to sort of get them to understand the nuances between, I don't know, sort of like voluntary certification, things like that. I think it's a difficult one, but definitely sign up and get working towards it. But yeah.
Just heard that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rachel. And also, just to stay with you for a second, if you could maybe highlight again, in your view, those areas of CSR which you think resonate most with the critical stakeholder audiences.
I think people, we kind of talked a little bit about philanthropy, and that's great. But I think it's, again, kind of going back to it being at the core of your business rather than just sort of being kind of something shiny you do. I think holding a charity ball once a year for a cause that you're interested in is a brilliant idea, and you shouldn't stop doing it. But I think really consumers want more than that now. I think the questions aren't so much about, are you giving a certain percentage of money away? I think actually the questions now are, the product that you've created for me and that I'm going to own and keep in my life, where has this come from and what kind of good has this brought to the world? I think it's difficult now for suppliers and retailers not to be able to answer these questions, but then to still, I don't know, sort of have a sort of charitable event and kind of do that side of it. I think actually it's really about sort of how you run your business and how you treat your own staff, as well as sort of where you source your materials and what the culture is like. And I think people are so much more engaged, and as well with the internet and Instagram and everything else, it's not a case now where you're some sort of mysterious organization behind a desk or behind a till. People can really sort of see into your business quite easily, and that actually brings up questions, and especially when there's other businesses that are sort of aiming to be that transparent and kind of want to invite people in to understand exactly what they're doing about their ethics and their sourcing and their company policies and work-life balance and all that sort of stuff. I think actually we all need to go back to looking at what is really sort of imbued in the core values of the company rather than the shiny events.
Yeah, I think philanthropy certainly still has its place, but I think say 20 years ago that was more or less what any company would do. It would be sort of just giving out the check and then that was it, and say goodbye. And that runs so many risks. I do remember in the very early days when CSR was sort of something new, and there was this very cautionary tale of an oil company in Sudan that was operating in Sudan, and they had built, as part of their philanthropic exercise, but really hadn't managed it at all, was a school. And then within 3 years, that school was being used by the government to torture its opponents. There were no school children there. So this had a huge impact on the company that did this out of the goodness of its heart. So we've come such a long way since that kind of thing. But do you have any examples, Rachel, from your observations of companies that have sort of like that example, got it wrong, but then found a way of being able to create a remedy and get back on track on it?
I'm not sure if I want to name and shame.
No,
but
we don't. No names.
No,
but company X.
Yeah. Okay. So should there be a company? Yeah, I think, because this is definitely something that I think anybody who wants to get into sort of ethical jewelry, whether that's sort of just running ethically or sort of going fully into it, I think that's the dangerous point. Just as we were talking about the kind of negative associations with this is the good gold and this is the bad gold, I think there's that fear that if you suddenly say, yeah, we're running ethically and we're an ethical business, that people start to actually really look into that. And there's a really active community of people who are very big on ethics, and if you say we're operating ethically, they will spend their evenings looking into that just to kind of find something that isn't right. And I think when that does happen, and it will happen, because I think especially the industry that we work in, the supply chain is so complex. It's not maybe as simple as sort of other industries, or maybe it is, but it's something could happen that's outside of your control, even if it's your best interest and you think, I don't know, mine is being run very well, and actually it turns out that it's not. I think the best thing to do is just to be honest about it. I think people appreciate that companies, I think more and more, are being viewed as personalities, and people can be fallible. And I think actually if you stand up and say, you know, we were funding this mine, we thought everything was great, but we found this out since, and we're absolutely, you know, we're going to put that on pause and work with them until, I don't know, labor issues or whatever it's been has been sorted out. But, you know, kind of hold your hands up and say, yeah, you're right, this isn't how it should be, and actually we're working to change that, or we're going to change suppliers and we're not going to do that. I think it's when companies almost kind of dig their heels in and pretend it's not happening. I think that's the real danger area, because it's not really a case, and as we sort of talked about transparency and online and the easy access to information, you know, back in the days, I imagine companies could just be like, that's absolutely not true, and it'd be very hard for you to prove otherwise. But now, if it's social media, and say it was a miner or who managed to get onto social media and, you know, is tweeting about what's actually happening, that kind of sort of blanket refusal to look up to what has actually happened that's just not an option anymore. So I think actually you should just admit it. I mean, people get things wrong and things happen out of your control, so just own it.
I mean, I think maybe if I could
Yeah,
answer,
jump in.
I think you have to be very humble about it.
Yeah.
You know, just state as it is. You know, yes, it is not perfect. Yes, we are at the beginning, but we have to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, somewhere, maybe it is today, maybe tomorrow, maybe July 2018.
Yes.
So, but we have to start somewhere. The past belongs to the past. We cannot change it. We have to remember about the past so that we do not repeat those errors. But we have to look into the future. And we have to set this milestone and work from it. And I mean, it very much remembers me when we started with the Fairmine gold. And so, yeah, so this is the good gold, and what about the rest? So, well, there is no enough. We have to start somewhere. The very first time we bought for the first collection, 400 grams. This is all that community has produced. So that is it. You know?
Very small collection.
So, exactly. So we said, I mean, from that community, this is all they have produced. So we use it. Tomorrow they produce more, we will use more. But if we are to go somewhere, we have to start somewhere. So.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
I mean, going on from what you were saying there, Rachel, I think the moral of the story there is that everyone will forgive a sinner, but no one will ever forgive a con man.
Yeah, it's about trust. You don't want to lose trust.
Yeah, the first thing is to open up. First thing is positive engagement, and your first message has got to be, we care.
Yeah.
And then take it from there. And I think also sort of outreaching and positive engagement with other stakeholders. Again, to be humble, would you agree, to be humble and not sort of make out that you can do this yourself, that you do need others to help, you do need your communities around you, you do need other stakeholders, you do even need competitors in the market to be able to sort of go along with this and build strategies.
Yeah.
Diana, I just, you know, on that theme,
yes.
In the past, has Chopard come under attack on any issue that, you know, you found very challenging? And how were you able to find a remedial strategy to that?
Yes, well, we have been criticized. We have been criticized internally, externally. I think if you are not criticized, I don't know, I don't remember who said that. If you are not criticized, that means that you are not doing anything new. So, so yes, and it is the criticism. It's part of the ecosystem. It should be there when we need it, also, so that we improve also on our way, you know. But the most maybe important is to do what you do, to do it with your heart, to believe in what you are doing, and to carry on, to be honest about it, not greenwashing or, you know, paying lip service, or how you call it in English, but just do it with your conviction and maybe it's not perfect, maybe it's not 100% from the first time, but you just keep going, you continue, don't resignate, So.
Yeah, it's always got to be a journey, I suppose, of continual improvement. This is what the OECD concedes in its due diligence guidelines, for example. This is continuous improvement, and again, I think for companies, having worked for one myself, if you're seen to be caring, as I say, the first thing is really just to demonstrate you care sincerely, and then you are actually putting into place a plan of action. And people will listen to you and take you seriously. I like your point about, if no one's criticizing you, then actually it's, I think it's like the old Oscar Wilde saying, sort of one thing worse than being talked about, that's not being talked about. So you're not innovating and no one's buying your products. So again, it shows they care, and some of those people who are criticizing you will care, especially from the consumer markets, because they like your product. And they don't want to, again, it's their pub test. Oh, you're wearing a Chopard ring. Yeah, I'm really proud of this because they do X, Y, and Z, not because they were wrong in A, B, and C. So that's really important. Again, sorry to bring up millennials, but we've come a long way since the late 90s when we had conflict diamonds. The only thing we had to worry about was Washington Post and the Daily Telegraph and the Financial Times. Today, there is a whole plethora of platforms out there on social media that we're constantly sort of engaging with, battling with, and working with. So Rachel, I wonder if you could just sort of enlighten us and give us again your insight on to what are the trends here and what kind of platforms count and what kind of, like bloggers or whatever, where are the best channels that companies should be looking at?
I personally think Instagram's a great one. I think because if you have good images, it's so easy to tell the story and get across what you want to say. And also I think it's got huge engagement levels, so I think that's great. Definitely for companies, I think there's a sort of an ethical Colombian miner called Muso, and they have some beautiful imagery of what is quite a dirty business of getting, emeralds out of the ground, but they've captured it, and they've obviously got an excellent photographer who's captured it just so beautifully, and they kind of produce these images on Instagram, and it's just kind of got loads of likes, and I just thought it's just, they don't even need to say that much, it's just kind of it's really telling the story and getting people involved, and suddenly you think, oh wait a minute, this emerald does actually come from a mine, and somebody's had to go down that mine to get it, and I think that's such a nice way to tell the story, so I think that's great. And I think what works really well, and it's interesting you started the presentation with this, video. I think video is so crucial now online, with people sharing, and people want to watch sort of short videos. And again, it just sort of, people don't have a big attention span online, and you don't get to have them for very long. So, if they're kind of scrolling through, what's going to catch their attention is a great picture, or they might stop for a while and watch a short video. I think what they're not going to do is go in the About Us section of your website and, read 6 pages that lay out exactly what, your plans for responsible creation of jewelry are. And while I think you should still have that, because there are definitely some people who will go and read all that and question you on it, but I think in terms of actually widening your scope and getting your message out there in quite a fun, accessible, sort of easily digestible way, I think great imagery and also short videos is great. And whether you use Facebook or Instagram, or whether you really want to get down with the kids and use Snapchat, which I know nothing about, it's kind of up to you, but I think it's just allowing people also that control to comment and to share and to get involved in your story, because the more involved they are in your story, the more likely they are to be involved with the brand, and that's what we all want at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it is such an important growing area, and I'm a 20th century boy, so all this is new and exciting to me. I'm not on Instagram yet, but I will be soon, I'm sure, I hope.
You should.
If I can just figure out how to do it. But I was with Idan. Idan, where are you? We were yesterday, and he was pointing out to me there's the Diamond Girl, with this really powerful young woman in the industry. Are you aware of her, Rachel? What's her name? No, the Diamond Girl you pointed out, who does the Instagram.
Diamond Girl.
It's just called the Diamond Girls. Okay, there you go. Really powerful, and it's a great living by doing this. Tens of thousands of followers.
It's
Yeah, so
insane.
such a powerful medium. So all of these are out there. I just wondered, Diana, if you could just let us in on what kind of platforms you see as really important. What are you utilizing at Chopard?
For staff or generally?
Just generally, yeah. All these.
Well, it is true that we are very active on digital.
Yeah.
We have a very good, strong team on digital platform, Instagram, Twitter, Chopard Diary, we also have that. So video, it's images and video. It's true that today we read less and less, unfortunately. Yeah. So we are more captured by images, so we are doing a lot. We have our website also, which is very, there is a lot of information on that, because it is true that we need also that to provide this, and the one who wants to read, the person goes through that. And internally, well, also with the clients, etc. For instance, the RJC, the fact that we are RJC certified, it's in all the electronic signatures of the company. It is printed in all the catalogs, so it's an integral part of the identity, and you sign on behalf of Chopard. And internally, we have a system of newsletters, the intranet, because also at the headquarters we have the main production site. That means that people they are not in front of computers, but in front of the machines. So developing an application or something wouldn't be really pertinent there. So we function either through announcement boards or something like this. And then also a very important communication point in the company, the heart of the company, the coffee machine. Having your information there, it's 100% sure that people will see it. Yeah. So we are using the facade of the coffee machine to communicate stuff.
That's when they will read, when they're waiting for their coffee.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that being innovative, being different, being pertinent, maybe not too lengthy in your communication. Just use your newsletter or communication. It's like a teaser rather than a lengthy article, and so that people get interested, and then they will look for the information. So because we don't have time, we don't read, we don't this and that. So yeah, a teaser stuff.
Good. Well, that's a really good insight. Thank you very much indeed. One thing we have, and there'll be some friends and colleagues online as well watching this, and some people here saying, well, that's great, because Chopard is a family company, but it's a big company. It's got resources, and many of, I think, some of the examples we were using, and Rachel, you were alluding to, also sort of larger companies. What kind of message would you give to small, medium companies in the business, those who can't afford to have a manager of sustainability or a communications manager or something like that? They're just working with the staff that they have, and usually it's the sales staff at the front line, and they're the ones that have to sort of be part of all of this as well. If you're economizing on this, if you're having to have a really tight budget, but these kind of issues do concern you, what would be your advice in what to focus on and where to source the help?
I think people is the largest resource we have. It is true that people are interested by the CSR, by CSR activities. Today, we are in a world where responsibility, social impact, these questions are important for our employees. So consulting them and creating project teams, maybe that was one solution if you don't have a dedicated CSR person. So having a green team or work-life balance team or something like this, by involving people and so that they can translate their passion, their personality into the activities of the company, and they will do that with a lot of pleasure and with a lot of enthusiasm. So we will also do that, despite the fact that we have a CSR entity.
Thanks, Diana. What about you, Rachael?
I think if you are a small company, I think it's maybe important to pick partners that you work with quite well, because if you, especially when it comes to sourcing, recently, a week or so ago in London, there was a very small gem fair held by 3 companies, and they were all ethical gemstone suppliers. And I tell you, that room was absolutely packed all day. It was incredible. But I spoke to people who came to the fair, and they said just what they really like is being, as a sort of a small designer maker maybe, being able to walk into that room and just relax, because they don't have to worry about where everything comes from because they know these companies and they trust them, and they know that they've actually, you know, done the due diligence on all the stones, and or they've, I don't know, you know, mined the stones themselves. And I think kind of picking other companies to work with and obviously choosing them well, but not being afraid to kind of have that sort of collaborative community effort. So if you have a great supplier that you can do, or you can go to something like that, that's great. And in terms of getting the message out, I actually think, I know we're kind of talking about, I think maybe when we say videos, maybe people get scared that it's going to be a huge budget, but you know, you can shoot stuff on, you know, on your phone now. And I think sort of Instagram and platforms like that, it's just been such a democratization of the PR machine, because before it was companies with, you know, big budgets who can have big PR companies and get the messages out there, but I think now you can just do it yourself. And when you kind of collaborate that with sort of really having a good culture in your company that we were talking about, where every person is an ambassador for what you're doing and what you want to do, I think, again, sort of leaning a bit on those people and just not, I think, not trying to do everything yourself, because if you are a small company, unless you have very deep pockets, you know, you are going to be doing everything yourself. But actually, I think working with people and also using the community around you to do that, I think, is really important, rather than just thinking you have to do it all yourself, because you don't. I think especially in, you know, the responsible jewelry community, I think people are very collaborative and they want to support each other because everybody really has the same goal. So I think it's about reaching out and just meeting people and coming to things like this and networking and finding out who you can work with.
And I think also trade associations there are to help as well.
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
Build your own networks, and you know, although we often get, well, we don't often get, but you know, so sometimes get comments from people saying, oh, RJC is just for the big guys. Well, you know, 60%, nearly 2/3 of our membership are what we class as minimum fee payers, SMEs. So again, you know, when you're talking about digging deep, you know, joining us, not such a big advertisement, but you know, joining something like the RJC is not, it is an investment, and you don't have to dig that deep. And join again. This is about this community of confidence we were talking about. You know, being part of something greater than any of ourselves individually. And that's the important thing. And that's where you get the energy, that's where you get the resources, that's where you get the will to sort of move on with this kind of thing. Just want to go on to, you know, we're giving advice to those companies who might want to get involved in this, but think, you know, small budgets, you know, where do I get the ideas, where do I get the resources, where do I get the money? What about those companies that, and I've had retailers say to me over the years, well, we don't get questions from the consumer when they come into our shop, so why should we bother with any of this? What would be your answer to that, Rachel?
I think you absolutely should bother with it. I hear that all the time, and there's just people will say, oh, there's no demand for it, or, you know, nobody ever asks me about it. But I can guarantee they're thinking about it. And if you have a competitor who is talking about what they're doing, and that consumer is thinking about it, and you both have a similar product, maybe similar price, they like, I think more and more people are going to go towards the ones that do have an ethical message. And yeah, you'll never have them asking about it, because they're not going to go to your shop. They're going to go to the other one. So I think kind of almost that quite closed mind thinking is dangerous, because I think you might be losing customers that you don't even know about. And also, when you're not investing in thinking about that, you know, you put yourself at risk again for somebody who comes in with a lot of difficult questions that you then can't ask, because I think people are much braver, much more informed now. And when we're kind of talking about coming back from sort of, you know, potentially like a responsibility, PR sort of disaster kind of thing, I think if you can say something like, we're trying to be better, we're trying to do this, or yeah, we do know where it's come from, I think, you know, people will accept that you're working towards it, or you've at least thought about it. I think if a customer comes in and asks you all these questions, and you either, you know, lie to them or give them a spin, or you just can't answer the questions, I think their estimation of you as an expert, which is what they want from a jewelry company, that completely dissolves the second you can't answer those questions. So I think everybody should be thinking about it.
Yeah, one of my thank you. That's really good insight into it. And I, when I've come across that kind of attitude, my answer is always to them is, well, I wouldn't be worried about the people coming into your shop and asking these questions. That's great. You've got an opportunity, again, going by what I said earlier in the first place about telling stories. You've got a great story. You can tell it. You have the confidence to do it. What I would be concerned is that those who aren't coming into your shop in the first place, because they've already done their research, because they've already seen your competitors, because they've already done a Google search. And so they're not coming in there and asking you the awkward questions because they've already made their mind up. They don't like what you're doing. They don't like the fact that you're sitting on your hands and doing nothing. Diana, you're a professional. Apart from working for Chopard, you're a professional. You're passionate about the craft, about the work that you do on sustainability and CSR. Again, so you're not going to be doing this just for your good health. You do it because you believe it's the right thing to do, but you do because it's interesting, you see it's completely relevant. So what would your response be to that kind of attitude?
I think if we wait till the end client asks, it's too late. You have to be ready beforehand.
Good point. Yeah.
You know, because I mean, we have a business to run, and I think it's also our responsibility to run this business in an ethical and responsible manner. If we have a standard which can support our effort and say and confirm that what you consider being ethical and responsible is certified, is standing to this and this standard, it's an additional guarantee that what you are saying, it's not a greenwashing thing, but it's a robust, it's a current statement, you know, and I think all the society goes towards responsible businesses. We have started this movement, all the momentum started from the food industry when we wanted to know that if what has been announced as organic food truly is, then we moved towards the cotton industry because Rana Plaza tragedy happened, and slowly we are coming on the top of the pyramid where the luxury product is. So this is an absolutely unavoidable movement towards transparency, towards responsibility in our businesses, and I think we cannot avoid that. We have to be in that movement.
Thank you, Diana. And again, a really good insight into that, because we're talking on the one side about people, whether they can understand why this is necessary, but then perhaps just going to the other end of it is measuring it. How do you measure the effectiveness of CSR?
Well, now this year we have, Wednesday also, we have announced that for our part, we have been joining the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals, the 2030 objective, because indeed we think that this way we can measure the impact of what we are doing, especially in our supply chain. There are specific targets and there are specific tools to measure the impacts. And we think that this is maybe the most appropriate way to go forward with our efforts. As I said, we have started doing good in our own family business, independent. So for ages it has been like this. In 2010 we have joined RJC because we thought maybe just doing good in our own corner alone, maybe it's not good enough anymore, and we should join the industry effort. So this is when we have joined RJC, and now we think that we are ready to go the next stage and say, okay, now there are these 2030 goals, and we should maybe join there and try to contribute there.
Good job, thank you. Rachel, how would you see best way of companies measuring the success, the efficiency of the CSR policies they put in place?
I think it's a really hard one because it's not so much about if you wanted to try a particular trend and you sold that and you knew exactly how many pairs of earrings you sold, you would understand that had worked or that had not worked. I think with CSR it's difficult. I think it's almost, if you think about, I don't know, it's like the effect of having a new shop fit. I think if you never had a new shop fit, you might think that if you got one that it wouldn't really, make a difference because everything's fine. But I think the second you get one, then you can measure that. But it's quite a difficult thing to measure. But if you don't do these things, I think you will one day maybe wake up having never had a new shop fit in 30 years and suddenly realize that you're completely outdated. So I think, but in terms of actually, cold, hard business measuring, does it work? I'm not quite sure how you can do that other than, is your business growing? are you engaging better with your customers? I think if all these things are yes, that could be to do with other elements of the business, or it could be to do with your CSR practices. But again, I think it goes back to consumers now buying into companies as a whole. They're not just buying into the product or the price. They want to be part of your culture. That's why they're buying into you. They could, they've got myriad choices where they can buy similar products, but it's buying into you. So I think it just comes back to whether your CSR is working. I don't know if you can, hard and fast measure it, but I think it's just about if your company is evolving, then it's probably working.
I like the shop front analogy. I've never come across that one before because, you're right.
Yeah.
And like type print on a newspaper as well, you have to keep on changing the font. But yeah, if you don't change your shop front, in the high street, you end up looking like something out of Downton Abbey or something. So I quite like that analogy. I'm going to sort of build on that one. Before we go to a Q&A, any sort of, not a soundbite as such, but a brief sort of couple of lines on what ultimately would be your recommendations, your advice to companies, both small and large out there, about going forward on your CSR?
Will I go first?
Go first.
For me, I think it comes down to authenticity. I think that's the key word in everything you do, whether that's how you promote what you're doing, whether that's how you actually run your business or source your products, or the way that you face up to your mistakes and the way you talk to people. I think, as I said, businesses are almost personalities now that people want to be friends with, and I think they want an authentic friend. And if you have a genuine message and they believe in you, I think that's key to everything. And it's just almost everything that you do, you just need to stop and look at it and think, is this truly an authentic message? Is this an authentic way that I'm doing it? If it is, I think you're absolutely going in the right direction. I think it's when you maybe do things because you think they should be done, or that's when the message starts to fall apart.
From my side, I would say proximity again, and building relationships, being inside a company or being with your partners. Because what we have achieved, for instance, in our supply chain, without building solid partnerships individually with one partner for this project, with another one for this project, it would never have been efficient, it would never work. And also it is also important, as I said, for the internal communication as well. If we are to build this, and if this is to hold, people should believe in it. And if you don't continually make them participate, listen to the feedbacks, and work constantly in that interrelation with people, otherwise all these initiatives, they just fade. So proximity for me, it's proximity and relationships.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you raised there, Diana, especially the one in terms of sincerity and is your heart in it. Nothing is going to work unless you absolutely believe in it. So what we'll now do is just thank you very much indeed for the panel discussion, and now we'll open it up to questions to our audience here. David.
Thank you. David Brough, Jewellery Outlook, and Carat Plus as well. I have a question for Diana and also for Andrew, if I may. Diana, Chopard announced here at Baselworld that it will be using 100% ethical gold in its supply chain from July 2018. Could you explain a little bit what you mean by ethical gold and how the supply chain will have changed from before? Yeah. And for Andrew, in the presentation, the written presentation at the beginning, I noticed that you're saying that you're working on bringing color gemstones and silver under the code of practice. I wonder if you could explain what the challenges are in bringing those two categories into your code of practice.
I don't think we've got long enough for that. Please go on.
Yeah, so yes, indeed, we have announced that we, as of July 2018, we will be we are committed to use 100% ethical gold. And by ethical gold, we understand gold which is sourced from responsible certified entities. So those responsible sources, we have divided these into two sections. One is industrial gold, and that means RJC chain of custody certified entities, partners, and artisanal gold. As you know, we have started in 2013 working with Fairmine Gold, but it is true that this is very artisanal, very small volumes, and this is also with this perspective of opening up and building the volume of artisanal gold we use. We have joined last year the Swiss Better Gold Association, which gives accreditation to Fairmine, Fairtrade, or other small-scale mining initiatives. So with the idea that we will be growing also that part of artisanal. So, and also this was possible because, well, it's a while that I was explaining to Rachel right now. We have been working since we joined RJC on that supply chain. When we started all that journey about the supply chain, our president, she was speaking with Livia Firth, the ambassadors of the Green Carpet Challenge. And it was a very interesting story when Livia Firth asked Caroline where the gold is coming from. And Caroline was very spontaneously, she said, "Oh, from the banks." And the very second she said that, she knew that there was something wrong about it. It was back in 2012. So the year when we got the certified RJC, and since then we were working to get all the supply RJC chain of custody certified. And this is why it took us also so long, and by now we are ready to make this announcement. Also, the announcement was possible because we are a vertically integrated company. We have our own foundry department. So we make our own alloys, and that is for the majority of the gold we are manipulating. So we are we have very limited dependency on the freshly mined gold. So that also eases a little bit the process, it is true. But yeah, we were for the part which we are outsourcing, since 2012 we have been working all the screws, hands, etc., all these little tiny things in a watch, that everything is certified either on industrial or on artisanal standard, which are existing.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Diana. Is that okay, David? You've got anything from? Good. I think thank you. On silver and colored gems, silver's reasonably straightforward for us, and we really confident that we'll have that in our COP by the end of the year. Colored gems, of course, is going to be, always was going to be a challenge. You know, there are some who would have quite happily kicked that particular can down the road for many years to come. But just because something's really difficult, really challenging, it doesn't mean to say we shouldn't try. And I'm very confident also that we will have that code and those standards for colored gems by the end of this year as well. The problem, of course, with that, as you know, is that there's very little sort of infrastructure in that sector. You know, there is no World Diamond Council, there is no World Federation of Diamond Bourses, and so on and so forth. So, you know, but I hope that by bringing this together and creating our standards, you know, this could act as a catalyst for that kind of organization. And I think an industry, a sector, I mean, one of the things that we do live and breathe on are our institutions, and they've been very valuable to big companies, to retailers, to everyone up and down the value chain, and they work together as well. And this is what helps protect us, helps promote us. So institutions are something which, you know, with RJC standards and having incorporated colored gems, we may well be able to use that as a catalyst to bring that to.
Andy, can I ask a question? Because as I said, we'd been live streaming that, and while you've been discussing, my WhatsApp has been pinging away with people watching online. And I have a question from Yaakov Almor, a friend from Israel that many of you may know, that he would like to put to both Diana and Rachel. I'll read it. Employees have indeed long been overlooked as partners in the CSR efforts. Generally, jewelers already have difficulties finding staff. So how would you make CSR part of the positive story in attracting new staff? Again, that's from Yaakov Almor in Israel.
Can take that?
Yeah, it's maybe one for you, yeah.
Well, as when Andrew was introducing me, it is true that I also take care of what we call work-life balance projects. And that was very important for our employees to listen what they need, what they expect from us as a good employer, and to facilitate their daily life, when they are at work, that they feel good. And so under that initiatives, we have developed plenty of small activities, be it sportive activities, be it cultural activities, so that, I don't know, dry cleaning and all that sort of things which make the daily life easier, you know. And so we are monitoring also the fidelity rate, the employee fidelity rate. And it has been increasing every year. So there's good mood, and if there is good mood, people will stay, you know. So I think this is also, and as I was saying at the beginning, we are cultivating this family spirit, proximity. I mean, I have been amazed, you know. I'm from Russia, and different maybe cultural environment. And when I started working at Chopard, it was my first Swiss employer. And when I saw the owners of such a, I mean, quite important brand, standing in the queue at the restaurant like everybody, you know, I was amazed. This is about proximity. Mm-hmm. And after holidays, we have the industry is known for this, the watchmaker holidays. After the 3 weeks of holidays, the family passes through the workshops and shakes the hands of the employees, saying, "Did you pass? Did you have good holidays?" This is about proximity, and that contributes to this good mood.
Good point. I like that story. Rachel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think another thing, sort of a basic way to, I think the first thing a prospective employee is going to look at is your website. So I think it's important to have those kind of core values there so they understand about the culture of the company and what you are doing in terms of CSR. But also another great way, I think, to kind of attract people in is to be quite flexible with how they have their own personal approach to CSR. There's a jewelry manufacturer in London, and they allow their staff to sort of take time out, to take days off to work with charities of their choice. It's got absolutely nothing to do with jewelry, but it's kind of, it's showing that there is that kind of culture that it gives them the freedom as well to sort of choose how they want to give back. And I think that's definitely an initiative that's worked really well for larger companies as well, just sort of giving them that freedom to, yeah, you can take, you know, 2 afternoons off a month or whatever it is you want to do if you're going to go and, I don't know, volunteer somewhere or help at charity. I think that's nice, and again, it sort of feeds into that whole sort of positive vibe, and it makes it a fun place to work because they feel like there's some like opportunities for them to do exciting things.
That's a really good point, actually, Rachel. I think inclusivity does engage them, it energizes them, it galvanizes them. They become your evangelists. And I remember for the Millennium, De Beers, for example, wanted to do this, went into this multi-million-dollar partnership with the World Health Organization to help eradicate polio in Angola. And I was privileged enough to manage that. And one thing that we worked through for that whole year that we were going to be doing it was we created what we called our Diamond Day of Hope, is which we gave all of the employees 2 days that they could take off, but not prescribing, saying it's got to be for the polio,
yeah.
But as you say, tailoring it to their own perceptions, their own needs, their own desires. And so, you know, we had people doing wing walking and goodness knows what, and people, very importantly, doing things together, gathering together. So it created a whole new dynamic, and it was really a great education for the company and myself and everyone, I think. And I think what you say there is really worthwhile everyone taking on board. Because again, it's about stories, it's about coming together. So any other questions from the floor? By the way, good question, Yakov. Nice to know that you're watching us online. And again, we welcome any questions that our online friends have as well. Any other questions from the audience here? Len?
I'd like to ask,
just the microphone coming your way.
I'd like to ask you about diamonds. You have this program with gold that has been implemented and almost completed. What kind of plans do you have for extending that to diamonds and bringing it to a place where it's kind of controversial these days?
Well, for the time being, in diamonds, a part of the Kimberley process certification scheme, there is nothing really existing. So we repose on that, but there are new initiatives like blockchain, and I think we will be going forward on that. We have tried also on colored gemstones. We are trying to build partnerships where we could maybe repercute the experience we had with the gold on the other stones and on the other raw materials. So we will see how we will find our way.
Thank you. David, one more. Just behind you.
Thank you. A follow-up on diamonds. Diana, one of the big issues in the diamond industry is the issue of non-disclosed lab-grown diamonds getting into melee. What steps is Chopard taking to reduce risks of this happening? And then a question, if I may, for Andrew. What can the RJC do to reduce risks of this practice of non-disclosed lab-grown diamonds getting into melee in the industry? What steps can you take to somehow police it or reduce the risk that it happens?
Well, it is coming into the new standard.
Yes.
The disclosure and the tests which become mandatory. And from our part, we tighten also the selection criteria of our partners, of the business partners. We believe that this is the core responsibility of the supplier, of the partner who is sending these stones, and that the proper due diligence and know your customer systems will allow us to let enter only accredited partners whom we trust.
I think Diana just more or less answered my question. The question for me on that is that, yeah, it is, we are looking, it's already in the COP. We're looking to embellish that and to make sure that when it comes to auditing, you have due diligence and all processes that are in place to ensure that you are properly disclosing that product. Yes, please.
Yeah, so Rachel, similar question or similar direction.
Sorry, could you just let us know who your name and where you're from?
Sure, my name is Nathan Hornstein. I'm Kamama Limited from London. My question is towards artificial diamonds. So maybe an opinion or outlook on this, because as you said earlier, it's still a very dirty business to dig them out of the ground. And wouldn't it be overall more responsible to produce them in a lab?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an argument for that, and I know a lot of people who are working with lab-grown diamonds are doing so for ethical reasons, because not only do they want to sort of skip questionable labor practices, they also don't want to have that environmental impact. And I think that in itself is, I think that's got huge potential for growth in a really positive way. I think what we're talking about with lab-grown diamonds being presented as mine diamonds, I think that's, I kind of see them as a completely separate issue, and yes, that is a problem, but I don't think we should maybe let that stifle the potential that lab-growns have. Because in fact, I met with a jewelry designer in London as well, Annabella Chan. She creates these beautiful sort of high jewelry look pieces, but everything from sort of the diamonds to the opals and the rubies, everything's lab-grown. And that was just a choice that she made when she was a student, actually. She just sort of met a friend whose family was in the mining business, and she'd sort of heard some stories and just decided that didn't fit with her ethics and where she wanted to go. And it's interesting, actually, with her, because when we were talking about how do you present yourself as an ethical brand or don't you present yourself as an ethical brand, she really doesn't. She doesn't talk about it. I only knew about it because I met her. If you kind of look at her website or her Instagram, you have to look quite deep to realize that those stones are lab grown. I mean, she obviously fully discloses them, but she doesn't kind of promote herself as an ethical brand on this basis. So yeah, I think it's has a positive, really interesting area for growth. But yeah, again, it's just kind of making sure that there's a firm boundary between the two, and it's kind of weeding out the diamonds that are sort of passed through as mine diamonds.
Thanks, Rachel. Any other questions?
I can't help thinking, Rachel, with your response, by the way, Hayley Henning, Greenland Ruby. This example that you just used of the designer in London, she's using ethical gemstones, but what is she doing about the metals?
Well, yeah, that's a good point, actually, which is she doesn't address that. So, but again, that's potentially maybe why she's not fully kind of presenting herself as an ethical jeweler. I don't know what her standards are, so I don't want to say sort of either way what she does. But that's definitely a good point. I had a conversation with another company a while ago who presented themselves to me as an ethical jewelry brand, and I was like, oh great. I was like, what makes you an ethical jewelry brand? They were like, oh, we know the family in India who cut our stones. I was like, oh, that's great. And it's like, yeah, you know, we go and see them and we see them work and we see them actually doing that. I was like, that's brilliant. I was like, and where do those stones come from? She was like, oh, I don't know. You can't, it's impossible to tell. And I was like, oh, and the metal you use? And she's like, oh, well, I get it from a refinery. And I was just like, okay. But I think, again, that kind of goes back to what we talked about, kind of a bit of sort of greenwashing. And I think that's just not acceptable and not valid anymore, because people are asking these questions and you can't just say you're ethical because you know the family that cut the stones, but you don't know where the stones come from or the metals or anything like that. So yeah, it's a completely valid point that you have, yeah.
Thanks, and I'd just like to, we're talking about stories, and it's so easy and we're talking about CSR and people to talk about the environment, and you can say because you've just got this script from your marketing people or your CSR people, but I'd just like to pay tribute to, if we're talking about storytelling and making sure that you're there on the, looking at these things with sincerity. I'd like to acknowledge Hayley Hennig and her work with Greenland Rubies, because she has been in very challenging conditions, been up there to see the product herself. She doesn't stand up on a platform and sort of say this is the kind of things, but she actually is then able to, with that sincerity, to be able to tell that story of how this product is brought from the actual source itself to the market, and open up there for questions. And this is the kind of thing I think you're talking about, is to be able to talk from the heart with your knowledge as well and get that story across. Any other questions? Russ. Russ, would you, just the microphone coming? You are a legend, but please tell us who you are.
Russell Shore, GIA. Yeah, there's among the colored stone, a lot of sort of alluvial producers or countries where alluvial stones are produced feel like they can't compete in the ethics side of it because they don't have the infrastructure for accountability as say, an organized mining company like the one Hayley represents. So sometimes they feel like there will be a default towards the organized mining sector, and since their economies sometimes depend on these colored stones, or mostly colored stone, how do you reconcile that, or is there a way to reconcile that?
Thanks, Russ.
Well, it is true. It is something we experienced also with the artisanal small-scale mining in gold, because it is true that a standard like RJC standard, which will give some reassurance to the manufacturer who is purchasing that raw material, it is maybe too heavy for that individual worker, because often it's a very light structure, maybe at maximum five people. And this all together, it's a small mining cooperative, and maybe they're working with more lighter systems, lighter standards, or like we did with the artisanal gold. Maybe that is a part of the solution. I also know that in that sector, again, in the gold, which we know mostly better, they are also working on a system of hubs, for instance, where there is the knowledge and the technology is shared. So that these individual miners, they can maybe gather and have better working practices because that common platform is offered to all of them. I know that in colored gemstones it's slightly different. There is no all the processes we have in gold. But maybe some of these solutions may help also to organize or help organize that sector as well. But it is true that it's a complicated subject.
Thank you. Rachel, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think as we've talked about artisanal gold mining, that's definitely something that's more progressed and standards like fair trade and fair mine. I think there almost needs to be a body for coloured gemstones who can come along and do that and actually work with the mines, because, as you say, it's whether they eat or not. It's, you know, it's really sort of like life and death to them that they get paid for these stones, and they're going to do that in any way they can. And if that's, you know, using unsafe chemicals, or if that's using unsafe working practices, you kind of have to respect that while we can all sit in a really nice room here and talk about this in sort of a really theoretical way, for them, you know, it's every day and they have to survive and they have to do what they do. And I think in the same way that sort of say fair trade has come in and worked with small mines, I think we almost need somebody to do that. A couple of years ago, I went out to Peru and visited a fair trade mine there, and it was brilliant to sort of see the evolution of kind of, and speak to the miners about how they'd started, and they'd sort of gone out there, you know, with a cardboard box and some tin food, and they were just kind of digging in the ground and doing it themselves, and then to see really like the business they're running today, because it is a business. I think still when we think about sort of fair trade gold, we maybe think of it as quite charitable, and, you know, but actually they've been supported in a way that they can run a business. But when I was there, I sort of looked beyond the confines of the mine that we were at, and you could still see sort of individual miners who were just like on the hill, sort of in the same state as these guys that started out, just sort of digging away on their own, or in small groups. So I think you do, I think to kind of expect it just to change without actually some help from organizations like that, I think it would be quite impossible for that to happen. So maybe we need something like that for Coloured Gems, who's going to come in and work with them and help them to grow and stand on their own. Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying earlier on, it's about infrastructure, it's about institutions, and it's about help. Again, no one can do this by themselves. I mean, that's a really reassuring, very comforting story there. And again, because there is an argument about, you know, premiums on fair mine and things like that, where it sort of becomes almost like an institutionalized charity, rather than sort of the long-term educating and mentoring these people to actually compete on a level playing field. So, you know, the old adage of, you know, what they need is a hand up, not a hand out.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we're just about at the end of time. Maybe one last question? No? Okay, good. Well then, just for me to thank very much indeed our fantastic dynamic duo for being here, and please show your appreciation for them. That really was good, and as I say, you can't emphasize enough how important it is to be able to not just implement and be good and do good, but also to be able to express that and articulate it, so that other people can carry that message for you as well, most importantly and most notably your employees. So thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate you coming here today and being part of this. I hope you have had something that you can take away from it. We are always here, the Responsible Jewellery Council, always here to answer any questions that you have surrounding this, surrounding our standards, and we are always an open door. And thank you very much indeed to all our friends and colleagues online. I hope you found that interesting, and we look forward to being able to publicize when our next event will be, and we hope that you'll be able to join us then as well. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.